Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time, another review. This time of a film that I had heard so many good things about. So many critics. So many good reviews. Really high rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And so many people saying it's the best horror film of the year. It's one of the scariest movies of the past few decades, a masterpiece, and so on and so on. So, and there were a couple people who were actually asked me about my thoughts on the film a while back. And this is a movie that didn't really sell me by the trailers, no matter how much praise they threw at me from all these different critics. It seemed like half the trailers, half the advertising campaign for this movie was just throwing in as many quotes as it possibly can of all these other critics and how much they loved the movie. And it just didn't interest me that much. Because I gotta be honest, this type of film isn't really my cup of tea. But I was like, okay, I'm willing to give it a shot. With all the good reviews, with all the people saying how great it is, it piqued my curiosity. I wanted to see if it was worth the hype. And if you ask me, it definitely wasn't. It was not worth the hype. I don't understand what it is about this movie that makes critics say it's the scariest movie of the year. This film didn't even get my pulse racing, let alone send chills down my spine. I'm gonna forget about this movie overnight. Easily. There's nothing about this film that sticks with me. There's nothing about this film that really scared me. Most of its scares were overwrought and laughable. But that's just my personal opinion, and I'll explain why soon enough. And if you like this film, that's fine. I have no problem with that. I just, like I always say, different opinions are what makes this world interesting. I just I didn't care for this film. Now, I didn't hate it. I wasn't like, oh, this is the worst film of the year or anything like that. But I definitely didn't like it. So, The Witch is a 2016 film. I know it's called a 2015 film, but it debuted at the Sundance Film Festival January of 2015. But it came out in theaters this February. So I'm calling it a 2016 film. It's directed by Robert Eggers. This is the first time he's directed a film, and he also wrote the screenplay. I honestly think he should have hired somebody else to write the story because the screenplay needed a lot of editing, especially when it comes to the dialogue. This film has more scenes of dialogue and more scenes of praying than it has scenes of witches and scenes of anything horror related. This film is barely even a horror film. This gives you the bare minimum of horror, folks, and it's definitely more of a historical drama than it is a horror film. I think it was mismarketed. I think it didn't. I honestly don't think it deserves to be hyped up to the moon. But that's just me personally. But yeah, I'll say this: Robert Eggers' direction is good. He sets up his shots well. I think his story leaves a lot to be desired, though, because it doesn't have very many characters that are worth rooting for or caring about what happens to any of them, except for maybe Thomason, but then her character is ruined by the film's ludicrous ending. Then, and it also, there's not a lot that happens. The story isn't that interesting, let alone that engaging, so the film becomes an absolute slog to sit through. This film took me 3 different times to finish it. The first time around, I tried to watch this movie, I fell asleep. It knocked me out. It just like a light, bam, out like a light. Second time around, I got 15 minutes in. It was so boring and so dull. I just couldn't get into it. And I was like, I'd rather chat with my friend Matt than watch this. So I quit. Then it took me this third time around, which I watched it today and finally was able to finish it. And I ended up starting it where I left off, about 15 minutes in. And I didn't miss anything. I didn't miss much. This is just, I don't get it. I don't understand the high praise that this film gets. And I don't have to. See, it's fine if people think this is a masterpiece. It's fine with me if people think it's amazing and it's one of the best films of the year. I mean, you're talking to the guy who did not like Ex Machina. This kind of reminded me of Ex Machina, another film that's highly touted and highly praised, that seemed like it had its own head stuck up its ass. It had its head shoved up so far up its own ass that it didn't really even bother to, I don't know, make a satisfying film or a good experience. But that's just me personally. Um, it didn't like really piss me off like some other films did. It just left me very underwhelmed and unimpressed. So, yeah, it features music by Mark Corvin, which I think was honestly just as overwrought as the film itself. It's this score is so heavy-handed and so over the top. There's not a single shred of subtlety in this score. This score sounds like a poor man's Wojciech Kilar from Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it has none of the style or the substance that that score has. This score is just scary noises. If this score could be translated into words, this is what it would sound like. It's scary! Ooh, are you scared yet? Ooh, so scary! Ooh! It's just, it doesn't work. It doesn't add anything to the sequences. It just makes sequences that are so benign absolutely laughable because it's trying so hard to make these scenes scary. For instance, this film has not one, not two, but like three or four different sequences of a rabbit, and it has scary music behind it, like it's trying to make you wet your pants at the sight of a bunny. At the sight of a rabbit is trying to make you paralyzed with fear. It doesn't work. I'm sorry. It's a rabbit. I'm not afraid of a cute, fluffy little bunny. I mean, what were you thinking? Did this writer see Night of the Lepus and realize how poorly that idea is executed and how poorly that idea is done? That has been done before? It doesn't work. Rabbits aren't scary. I don't know what you're thinking. At least Monty Python got it right. They didn't take it seriously. So yeah, that's a prime example of this film's problem. It's just about more than half of its scares are just taken so seriously with this overwrought score that is trying as hard as it possibly can to scare you that these sequences just become laughable. There's a scene in the film where the mother hallucinates, I guess, that her dead son and her other dead baby are back to life, and she thinks she's suckling her baby, but it turns out to be a crow that's nibbling on her tit, is pecking at her tit, and she's laughing her ass off like a maniac, and the score is so heavy-handed and so over the top, and she's laughing, and it fades to black, and here I am rolling on the floor in laughter because this scene is supposed to be scary, I guess, and it's just stupid. It's stupid, it's the opposite of scary, and if anything, it's just weird. But it isn't scary. I don't, there's a lot of stuff in this film that I guess it's meant to be scary and horrifying and make your blood curdle, but all it does is make me laugh. So, especially the climax, which is just a very weak climax. Film's exhausting to sit through too. It's only an hour and a half and or so, around an hour and a half, and it feels like 3 hours. It's drags so much. I'll give the film this, though. It did accurately recreate the Puritan era and the Puritan times. Some good costume design. The cinematography is I thought the cinematography was well done. Has some luscious sequences by Jaron Blaschke, but at the same time, the fact that the director decided to put everything in some gray filter doesn't really do the cinematography justice. It just makes all these different shots blend together. It makes them bleed together and they become pretty forgettable. And they don't really stand out. So even that isn't as good, isn't really that great. But there are some nice shots. I have to give the film that. The editing by Louise Ford, I would probably say, is one of the strong suits of the film. And it has some good performances by some of the cast members. I mean, they do the best with what they have, which is pretty much not, isn't much at all. Uh, Anya Taylor-Joy as Thomason, I thought she did a good job. Ralph Ineson as William, when I could understand what he was saying, because he has such a low, deep voice that, and he's speaking this ye old English. It's sometimes he just garbles his words, and you can't understand what he's saying. And I know some people have said, we should turn on the English subtitles. Why? Why should I have to turn on the English subtitles for a movie that's in English? I didn't have a hard time understanding anything that Thomason was saying, but with the father, for some reason, he's all like, Thomason, Caleb, Jesus and God, blah, 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 blah. It was just like, he sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. It was just, and I think in large part it's because of the sound editing. The sound editing in this is awful. The music is turned up to 11. The score is way too loud, and the dialogue is way too quiet. So you have to turn the film up way too loud in order to understand what they're saying, and then it blows you out of the room with its overblown score that's turned up to 11. But you have to do that because otherwise you won't be able to understand what anybody's saying. So, yeah. Kate Dickie, I also thought did a good job as Catherine. The kid actors, I think they could have done a better job. Especially Harvey Scrimshaw played Caleb. He really chewed the scenery in a later scene that was pretty hard to watch. And but they weren't terrible or anything. Excuse me. It's not like there was anything in this film that was particularly, and by the performances anyway, by the acting, that was particularly awful. So I'll give the film that. Then we get to the story, which I'm going to spoil it. Spoilers. Takes place in 17th century New England. A man named William is banished from a Puritan plantation alongside his family, his wife Catherine, daughter Thomason, son Caleb, and fraternal twins Mercy and Jonas. In their state of exile, the family builds a farm by the edge of a large secluded forest far from the Puritan settlement. Catherine soon gives birth to her fifth child, Samuel. While being closely watched by Thomason, Samuel mysteriously vanishes from her presence. She just plays a game of peekaboo. She goes peekaboo, and then the baby is gone, in like a blink of an eye. It is then revealed that Samuel was kidnapped by a witch living in the woods, who kills him and uses his blood and fat to make a topical ointment for her body. I guess they'll make her fly, like in the movie Warlock. Uh, this sequence is not. It's basically all you see is there's this naked old witch. Yeah, just like I needed to see that naked old woman ass just right in my face. And hag ass, bam, right front and center. So wrinkly old hag ass in your face, and she goes up with a knife, puts in front of the baby, and then it quick cuts, and then she's bathing herself in what looks like cranberry sauce to me, but I guess it's supposed to be ointment or something. And yeah, that's pretty much your first glimpse of the witch. Some of the other stuff you see is like I admit there's a pretty good good looking shot where the witch is standing in front of the moon in the woods, and there's this really it's a well put together, well set up shot. I'll give the film credit for that. But yeah, that's your first glimpse of the witch. Catherine, devastated by Samuel's disappearance, she spends her days crying and praying. And speaking of praying, like I said earlier, this film has more scenes of praying than it has scenes of witches or scenes of horror or anything like that. It's I swear to God, I think the crew, they had a betting pool going on over who could pray the most. It's like, Whoever could pray the most in this movie wins the pool. I hope it was worth it. I hope the person who won got a good amount of money for that, because this movie just has so much praying. I understand that's the whole point of it, trying to show that despite all of their praying to God, God can't help them and God can't save them and so on. But that's also another problem this film has. There's no good and evil. It's just evil. And then it becomes just everything just becomes diluted. The evil itself becomes diluted because there's nothing but evil. There's no semblance of good. There's like maybe bits and pieces, but it doesn't seem like it's that effective. The closest you can get is Caleb maybe getting forgiven by God, and then he dies anyway, so who cares? So it just seems like evil just overpowers everything, either because good is dumb, or good just isn't good enough. Then William takes Caleb hunting in the forest, where Caleb confronts his father about his unbaptized fate. William in turn confides to his son that he traded Catherine's prized silver cup for hunting supplies, and on the farm the twins play with the family's black goat, Black Phillip, whom they claim speaks to them. And during that wood scene, that's where you get the scene, one of the shots of the rabbit, the evil rabbit. You better run and hide. Buster Bunny's gonna kill you. He's gonna go after your ass. Uh, and It's ridiculous. And there's a moment in this particular sequence that perfectly encapsulates how I feel about this movie, where the father is got ready to shoot the rabbit and the gun misfires in his face. And that perfectly encapsulates my feelings on this film. It's a misfire. The witch is a misfire. It blows up in your face. It blew up in my face. It's got potential, but it wastes it. It's top heavy with dialogue. There's not a lot of things that do happen, and when these horror elements do show up in the film, they're laughable and they're forgettable. So it's the opposite of The Darkness, where instead of it just being generic moments of horror that are forgettable, it's laughable moments of horror that are also forgettable. So that night, Catherine blames Thomason for the disappearance of her prized silver cup, while also implying she was responsible for Samuel going missing. There's a lot of this family drama in this movie. Most of this film is family drama. And so as the children retire to bed, they overhear their parents discussing sending Thomason away to serve another family. Because she's old enough now and she had her period and so on. You know, she's old enough now that she should go away, I guess. The next morning, Caleb and Thomason sneak away to go hunting in the forest. Why? I have no idea. They couldn't wait till morning to go with their dad. I don't know. Their dog gives chase to a hare. Yep, rabbit. And the killer bunny rabbit. And Caleb follows, leaving Thomason astride the horse. She's on the horse. The horse knocks her unconscious, knocks her off because it's the evil rabbit, and so that sends the horse into a frenzy. Bucks Thomason. Caleb, I guess, really wants that rabbit. I don't know how much food that little thing's gonna give his family, but he's like, I really gotta get that rabbit, I guess. Runs around the woods, doesn't know where he's going, chases after the rabbit, finds his dog dead and disemboweled, and then he wanders further into the woods, beyond the point of no return, and then he's lured into a house in the middle of the woods with a witch who's disguised as a young woman. Like that's her whole disguise, I guess. She looks like she walks straight out of a brothel with her tits hanging out and everything. And she seduces the kid. The kid doesn't think, "Oh, this is freaky. This is creepy. I should just run away." No, he just stands there like, "Ugh," lets her kiss him, and then you see old hag hand grab him, and then cuts to black. That's what happens like 40 minutes. That really, that's all that scene is. That's all it is. So then that night, Caleb then returns to the farm. He's naked. He's out of it. He's sick from some unknown illness. Catherine suggests that her son's mysterious sickness is because of witchcraft and prays over Caleb. The next day, Caleb suffers a seizure and passionately proclaims his love for Christ before dying peacefully. And that's the sequence I was talking about, where the kid actor just really really overacted there to the point it was just cringe-inducing to watch. And during this whole sequence, they're all the younger twins are blaming Thomason for this, and this is where you have one other element in the film that I thought was genuinely creepy, where the parents are trying to open Caleb's mouth, his jaw won't open, they pry it open, and he coughs up an apple. I'm like, okay, that's weird. And that's pretty. That's effectively, disgusting and definitely something that isn't normal. So that was somewhat unnerving. I'll give the film credit for that. But then it's ruined by Caleb, the actor who played Caleb's overacting. Talking about, kiss me, Lord, Jesus, kiss me right on the lips. Let me kiss you. This really, really bad acting by I believe it's Harvey Scrimshaw. So of course, and the other twins see Thomason. She's praying, but the other twins can't pray because they've been bewitched. But doesn't matter. The mother, Catherine thinks it's Thomason, and then there's more family drama, of course, because of this. Um, and aftermath of Caleb's death, the twins accuse Thomason of witchcraft, and then she counters their accusations by revealing the twins' ability to converse with Black Phillip. So enraged at their behavior, William boards up Thomason and the twins inside the stable with the goats. Which I don't know why you would do that, considering that Thomason already said that, well, it's Black Phillip that they're talking to. They're talking to Black Phillip and he's corrupting them. Why would you lock them in literally with what could potentially be the devil? You're locking them in with evil. Why are you doing that? Because I guess good is dumb in this movie. Oh yeah, now you know why evil will always triumph. Because good is dumb. Dark Helmet was right. So anyway, he locks them up with the evil goat. And after dark, the twins and Thomason, they awake. They wake up and they find the witch inside the stable drinking the blood of the animals. And she looks like that old hag from The Shining. And she's just suckling on the cow's teat, I guess. Sucking on some cow tits, then looks at them and ha 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 with the old hag witch face, and then disappears. That's it. And this is like an hour and 5 minutes or so into an hour and 30-something minute long movie, folks. That's all that has happened in over an hour. That's all that has happened. So then in the house, Catherine is overjoyed by the vision of Caleb and Samuel's return, which is a complete and utter fallacy. She's going crazy. She's gone bye-bye. That's where you have the moment where she thinks she's breastfeeding the infant, but in reality it's a raven. Oh, it's a raven, not a crow. Regardless, it's a raven that pecks at her tit while she laughs hysterically. Just describing that sequence to you, does that sound at all scary to you? It doesn't to me. It just made me laugh my ass off. I was laughing. It's complete opposite of scary. And then the next day, William finds the stable destroyed, the goats eviscerated and bloodless, the twins are missing because we really honestly don't have the balls to show these witches kill these kids. And so now William is upset. Catherine is crazy. She's gone deranged. She's gone bye-bye, like I said. She's blaming Thomason for everything that's happened. But then, of course, this happened. She's crazy. She's out of it. But before this, William gets gored to death by Black Phillip. Yeah, that's what happens. Black Phillip just all of a sudden just stabs him with a horn. And then he's just like, oh, what? What happened? And then he grabs an axe. And he looks like he's about to do something with it. And then he just drops the axe and just stands there, says a few lines, and lets Black Phillip gore him to death. And he falls into a wood pile that all the wood pile that he was chopping throughout most of the movie then falls on top of him. This is supposed to be your strong presence in this film. This is supposed to be the guy who is the strength of the family, and he literally dies like a bitch. He goes out like a bitch. He just he has an axe. He could just kill the goat, but no. At least he died fighting. No, he drops the axe and says some line or whatever that probably has to deal with his religion that has done nothing to help him and has done nothing to save him in this film, which gets to the whole point because evil will always triumph because good is dumb. So he dies. His wife then goes crazy, goes on, basically is trying to kill her daughter, and starts to strangle her. Thomason grabs a knife, slashes her in the face, and then that isn't stopping her. She's bleeding her own blood from over her eye onto her daughter's face, and her daughter's saying, I love you, but she isn't hearing any of it because she thinks she's a witch. She's responsible for everything that's happened, and so she's gonna kill her. And Thomason then kills her own mother in self-defense. In the only tense sequence in the entire film. And this happens like over about an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes into the movie. And I'm like, okay, all right. That's a very horrifying sequence. The most effective scare, the most effective moment in this film that was at all horrifying to me was this moment where Thomason has to kill her own mother in self-defense. Much like The Darkness and other films that I've seen, it seems like the human horror element is better than anything that has this supernatural element attached to it for some reason. So then Thomason does what every person would do in this situation. She talks to the goat and basically starts asking a question, basically demands it to speak to her. It does. And then then it turns into a guy who I guess is the devil, tells her to pretty much strip naked, take a look at this book, and then she walks through the woods naked, comes across this coven of witches who are hanging around a fire, chanting, and it's just absolutely ridiculous because it's so overwrought. It's not subtle at all. They're like, "Ooh, we die, yeah." And then she goes in and walks in with the witches. And then the witches all start floating in the air like they got sprinkled with fairy dust by Tinkerbell. And I'm just laughing my ass off. So I'm like, in what way is this scary? And I'm just like, what? They're all floating in the air. And then Thomason, she starts laughing and chanting along with them and smiling. And they have the ooh, it's scary, so scary music. And then she floats up in the air. And then she floats up above the trees in what looks like a crucifix position, and then the movie fades to black. And that's it. And I feel like I wasted my time. It was a total waste of time. Because if this film feels like it's building up to something, it's building up to something big, and then nothing happens. Some witches float around a fire, and Thomason joins them inexplicably, and then it ends. So I guess the logical choice you would make in this situation, folks, after your entire family is literally slaughtered and dead because of this evil presence, is to just walk into this evil presence with open arms and just join the party, I guess. Doesn't sound very logical to me, unless she was a witch the whole time. And if you, I was so hoping that it wouldn't end like that because I was like, there was a line of dialogue that literally predicts the ending of this movie, where Thomason says something to the effect of, "Oh yeah, we're gonna float around a fire naked," and but that's what happens at the end of the movie. I was like, don't have this typical cliche horror film ending that you see in 95% of horror films lately, where it ends with a twist that would make M. Night Shyamalan blush. And that's exactly what happens. It ends exactly like that. Typical cliched ending where pretty much everyone is fucked, evil wins, end of story. Why the fuck should I even bother? Um, yeah, I just, I don't, I don't get it. It just didn't do it for me. It just didn't do it for me. But I'm not really the biggest fan of films that take place during this particular time period either, to begin with. But this film had potential. I think it could have bucked that trend if it just cut back on the dialogue and the praying, less shots of praying, less dialogue, and more sequences of genuine horror. More, just more, just more. Give me more. I get barely even a morsel of horror in this film, and this is supposed to be the best horror film of the year. And yeah, I don't. It's just disappointing, I guess. It's more underwhelming than anything else. The ending is like if you had a bottle of Coke and you put a bunch of Mentos in it, and instead of everything just exploding in this fountain of soda, it just a little trickle of foam and soda pours out the top. It's just it's just disappointing. You were expecting some big grand finale and expecting it to end with a bang to make the slow burn worth it, and it doesn't happen. It's just a total misfire. So yeah, I really don't know what else to say about The Witch. I just found it to be a boring movie that really didn't keep me that interested. The plot wasn't that engaging because there isn't really a lot that happens, and there's the characters. There's not very much character development, but I wouldn't have a problem with that if they actually had personalities that made them likable. But there isn't any of that. So I don't care about what happens to any of these people. Thomason is probably the only one, but then her character is completely ruined by her inexplicable decision to, I guess, join the Coven of Witches at the end. Maybe she was a witch the whole time. Regardless, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Either way, it's a waste of a character. It's a waste of people's time. The whole film is trying to set it up like she's trying to prove that she's not a witch, and that's actually more scary. The idea that her family doesn't believe her. The idea that they, despite all of her best efforts, believe that she is a witch and they're willing to kill her over this. That's more terrifying than her floating around a fire with a bunch of witches. But nope, rather not go there. Um, if you ask me, I know it's a folk tale or fairy tale. I've seen this done better in films like Company of the Wolves by Neil Jordan. That has a fairy tale, folk tale aspect to it. It's a twisted version of Little Red Riding Hood. Has some great practical makeup effects, and it's a much better film if you ask me. If you want to see like a crazy movie with a witch and shots of the woods and a witch floating around, watch William Friedkin's The Guardian. That film, I think, is 10 times better than this movie, and it got shat on when it came out. I think it's a very underrated movie. It's not perfect, but I think it's a lot better than this. Jenny Seagrove is fantastic as Camilla. You have some really crowd-pleasing, fun moments. You have some great bits of gore. This film couldn't even deliver that, although it does have tits and blood. So people say, oh, you just want tits and blood. This film has tits and blood. So what's your point? It has tits and blood, but it's still boring. It's still dull. It's still tame. The witch, more like the bitch, as in female dog, as in tame, as in a tame female dog. This is one of the tamest, lamest, and just forgettable horror films I've seen in recent memory. And it's the film's also hard to relate to because it takes place in a bygone era. So you have characters you don't relate to. You have a story that isn't that engaging. You have characters that aren't that likable, which makes the story even less engaging. You have horror elements that are sprinkled in throughout that are overwrought and don't work. Either they're laughable or they're just, meh, at best, they're just kind of creepy. And then it all builds up to a very lackluster climax that has no impact and is beyond laughable. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say. Except if I was going to rate the film out of 5 stars, I would give The Witch 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5 stars. I think it's a poor film. I just was not a fan of this movie. Um, I think it's better than The Darkness, and it's probably not the worst film of the year. But like I said, I didn't like it either. I sure as hell didn't like this movie. And yeah, that's it. That's my thoughts on The Witch. As usual, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. See ya.